I walked into the house after a long day at work, eager to relax, but something didn't feel right. The usual peace I hoped for was missing. As I passed by our small office, there he was, Greg, my husband, sitting at the desk, papers spread out in front of him. And not just any papers, my personal files, bank statements, and journals. The realization hit me like a punch. My heart pounded as I tried to make sense of what he was doing. What? What are you doing, Greg? I asked, my voice quivering with a mix of anger and disbelief. He looked up slowly, not the least bit apologetic. Just checking on things, Emma, he replied calmly, his tone patronizing. With the baby coming, I need to know everything's in order. His nonchalance stirred a deep anger within me, one I had tried to bury for too long. You have no right to go through my things, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to hold onto whatever shred of respect I had left for him. Greg barely flinched. Instead, he leaned back, crossing his arms as if I were the one overreacting. Emma, your finances are our finances. If there's a problem, it's my business too. You're about to be a mother, and you're acting like I don't have a right to know. Don't we all need to be responsible here? His words were smooth, like he'd rehearsed them, but the look in his eyes was hard. He was crossing a line he didn't even seem to see. But it wasn't just about today. This was about the months I'd spent watching Greg and his mother, Susan, slowly take control of my life, invading my personal space, my decisions, and even my thoughts. That evening, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, Greg snoring peacefully beside me, while my mind raced, replaying our conversation and every red flag I'd ignored. Since the moment Susan had moved in temporarily to help with the pregnancy, my life had felt like a tightrope walk. And yet, in every decision, Greg sided with her. If I wanted space, she needed to help. If I expressed a preference, I was being difficult. My wants and needs became secondary, and then, it seemed, they became invisible. The next day, I confided in my best friend, Rachel. We met at our usual coffee shop, a place where I felt like I could breathe. Rachel listened carefully, her eyes widening as I poured out everything I'd been holding back. The constant belittling, the passive-aggressive comments from Susan, the feeling of being trapped in my own home. Emma, she said finally, her voice soft but firm, you don't have to keep living like this. You're not alone. You deserve so much better than this. You deserve to be happy. Her words struck me, and a knot I hadn't realized was there loosened just a little. Rachel was right. I didn't have to keep suffering quietly, putting up with Greg's coldness and Susan's manipulations. That day, for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a life without them. A life where I had control over my choices, where I could raise my child in peace. I realized I needed help. I needed to find a lawyer and get my life back. A few days later, I walked into the office of a family attorney named Ben. The room was warm, filled with light from large windows, and the air felt calm and inviting. Ben looked to be in his mid-40s, with a kind smile and a reassuring presence. I felt a glimmer of hope as I sat across from him and explained my situation. I feel like I'm constantly being watched, I said, my voice breaking as I described Susan's overbearing presence, Greg's constant siding with her, and how they both managed to isolate me from friends and family. It's like they're trying to erase me. Ben listened intently, nodding with understanding. When I finished, he leaned forward. Emma, you're very brave for coming here today, he said. You're taking a necessary step for your well-being and your child's. But be prepared. Standing up to them won't be easy. They'll likely fight this. I'm ready, I replied, and in that moment, I meant it. I can't keep living like this. In the following weeks, Rachel helped me gather documents and create a plan. Each piece of evidence, every journal entry, every carefully saved message felt like a piece of armor. There were nights when I felt like I couldn't go on, when the weight of my decision threatened to pull me under. But each time, I thought of my future, and I thought of my baby. One night, I sat down with my parents and told them everything. They had sensed something was wrong, but they hadn't known the extent. Their support was unwavering, and the pride in my father's eyes as he told me, "You're stronger than you know." Emma gave me the resolve I needed. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. I barely slept, my stomach a bundle of nerves as I walked into the courthouse with Rachel and Ben beside me. The waiting area was filled with people, all facing their own battles. I tried to steady my breathing, reminding myself that this was my fight for freedom, for my life back. Greg and Susan were already seated when I entered the courtroom. Greg's face was hard, expressionless, while Susan's gaze was cold and sharp, her eyes calculating. She looked at me as though I were a stranger, but that's exactly what I'd become to her. I wasn't the submissive woman she'd wanted me to be. Ben leaned over and whispered, "Remember, Emma, you're here to tell your story, to claim back what's yours." I took a deep breath, feeling my strength return. I was ready. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the stand, my legs trembling but my mind sharp. I took a deep breath and started from the beginning. I married Greg because I loved him and I thought we could build a life together. But things changed, I said, my voice steady. His mother moved in without asking me. Suddenly, every decision I made seemed to be a problem. I was treated like an outsider in my own home. The words came easier now, and I continued, describing the feeling of being pushed aside, of constantly being watched, of having every choice questioned and overruled. I shared how Susan would criticize every decision I made, how Greg would defend her no matter what, and how I'd been locked out of my own life. The judge listened intently, her gaze focused and empathetic. This isn't just about a house or a marriage, I said, fighting back tears. It's about the right to live freely and to raise my child in a home where I'm respected, where I'm safe. Greg's lawyer presented his side, painting me as overly sensitive, accusing me of trying to separate Greg from his family. They claimed Susan was only trying to help. But when I looked at the judge, I saw that she was listening, really listening to my words. She could see through their words, and that knowledge gave me strength. That night, just as I was beginning to feel some hope, Ben called. Emma, we need to meet, he said, his voice serious. Greg and Susan are planning to claim you're emotionally unstable. They're trying to prove you're unfit to be a mother. I felt anger rise within me, hot and unyielding. They're lying. I've done everything to hold this family together, and they're the ones tearing it apart. Ben nodded. We'll gather more evidence. Their claims are desperate, and the judge will see that. But be prepared. They won't back down easily. Over the next few days, Rachel and I worked late into the night, gathering more proof. I combed through my journals, recounting every hurtful moment, every degrading comment. The memories were painful, but each one steeled my resolve. I would not let them win. Finally, the day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom felt colder, the tension palpable. Greg and Susan sat across from me, their faces hardened. I could feel their resentment, their anger. But I was beyond caring. This was my fight, and I was ready to see it through. As I spoke, I laid bare every moment of manipulation, every instance of feeling like a prisoner in my own home. I described the pain of being isolated, the nights I'd spent crying in silence, feeling like I was disappearing. I could see the judge's expression soften, her brow furrowing as she absorbed my words. Finally, Greg's lawyer tried once more, repeating their claims of my supposed instability. But I saw the judge's expression shift. She wasn't buying it. When the judge delivered her verdict, her voice was calm but firm. Based on the evidence and testimonies, I find that Emma has endured emotional abuse and manipulation. I am granting her full custody of her child and sole ownership of the home. The relief washed over me, so powerful I thought I might collapse. I'd won. I was free. In the weeks that followed, I moved back into my house, my true home, and started redecorating, reclaiming my space. Every brushstroke of paint, every new piece of furniture felt like a step forward, a small victory in rebuilding my life. And as I stood in what was now my baby's nursery, looking out the window with my hand on my growing belly, I whispered a promise to my child. You'll grow up in a home filled with love and respect. A home where you can be anything you want to be. I knew my journey wasn't over, but I finally taken control. I was no longer lost. I was finally, truly free.